All right, so you know how everyone always wondered where Bitcoin's headed next, right?
Yeah.
Well, today we're going to do a deep dive into something that's trying to answer that question. AI predictions for Bitcoin in 2025. You actually shared this really interesting 8-minute video about this, and it lays out some scenarios that even had me raising an eyebrow. So basically, we're going to break down how these AI models even work, what they're saying about Bitcoin's future, and most importantly, how all of you listening can actually use this info without, just taking it all at face value.
Yeah, one of the things that really jumps out here is how AI is using massive amounts of data. We're talking data sets that would take humans forever to actually go through.
Right, it's not just about looking at a few charts.
No,
These
no.
models are like the big ones you hear about ChatGPT or even DeepMind. They're diving into like years of price data, market trends, all the economic indicators out there. Heck, they're even like reading what people are saying on social media.
Exactly. They're not just looking at numbers, they're also analyzing sentiment, trying to figure out how people are feeling about Bitcoin. Are they fearful? Are they excited? And then they use that to see if there are any connections or patterns that might suggest where Bitcoin is going next.
So it's like having this super-powered research assistant that can process information like crazy fast. But how do they actually learn? I mean, how do they go from all that data to making these predictions?
So it's actually all based on something called machine learning. And it's pretty simple. Basically, you feed these models huge amounts of data, and then you train them to recognize patterns and relationships in that data. Like imagine you're teaching a computer to recognize a picture of a cat. You show it thousands of pictures of cats, and over time it starts to pick up on the features that make a cat a cat.
Okay, so instead of cat features, these models are looking for patterns in Bitcoin's price
Exactly.
and all that other data we talked about.
Yeah, they're trying to use the past to predict the future.
Makes sense, but that doesn't mean they're always right.
Of course not, no.
In fact, the video even points out some times when these AI models got it totally wrong. Like back in 2021, a lot of them predicted Bitcoin's price would be way higher than it actually was.
Yeah, and that was a case of something happening that no one could have predicted, like that huge spike in inflation. It really messed up the models.
Right, because they had never seen anything like that in the data they were trained on.
Exactly, and these are what we call black swan events, things that are totally unexpected and disrupt everything.
Okay, so AI isn't a perfect crystal ball. Got it. But it's still pretty powerful. So what does it actually say about Bitcoin in 2025? The video lays out these three main scenarios, right?
Yes, it does, and they each paint a very different picture of what might happen.
Okay, let's hear it.
All right, so we've got the bullish scenario, the bearish scenario, and then what they call the sideways scenario.
All right, buckle up. Everyone sounds like it's going to be a wild ride. All right, so we've got like the three scenarios, bullish, bearish, and this sideways one. Let's start with that super optimistic one. Bitcoin hitting $100,000 or more. What's the AI seeing that makes it think that could actually happen?
Well, one of the big thing is this idea of growing institutional adoption. More and more big players like hedge funds, even some banks, they're starting to see Bitcoin as a legitimate asset.
So it's not just like the tech geeks anymore, huh?
Exactly. And all that institutional money coming in, well, that could have a huge impact on the price. Plus, there's the whole ETS thing.
Right, right. The Bitcoin ETF, that's been in the news a lot lately. How would that change things?
Well, an ETF would make it much easier for regular investors to get in on Bitcoin. And that could increase demand even more, which could push the price up even higher.
Okay, so big institutions getting involved, easier for everyone to invest. Sounds like a recipe for a price surge. But hold on, you said earlier that AI isn't always right. It missed the mark back in 2021. What's to say it won't happen again?
That's a really good point. You always have to be cautious. Remember, these models are based on what's happened in the past, and the past doesn't always predict the future perfectly.
Right, especially with something as crazy as crypto.
Exactly. There are always those unexpected events, the black swan events we talked about. Those can totally throw things off course.
So even in this super bullish scenario, no guarantees?
Definitely not.
What about the downsides? What could trigger that bearish scenario where Bitcoin drops below $20,000?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. The AI seems to be really focused on two things: regulation and the global economy.
Makes sense. Those are both big unknowns right now.
Exactly. If governments start cracking down on crypto with tougher regulations, or if we go into a major recession, well, that could scare off investors and lead to a big sell-off. And that could cause the price to plummet.
So it's like this tug of war between those positive things we talked about, like more people adopting Bitcoin, and these potential threats like regulation and a bad economy. But here's what I find fascinating. Even in that bearish scenario where Bitcoin crashes, the AI still thinks it will recover.
Yeah, that's something that keeps coming up in these predictions, no matter how bad things might get in the short term. The AI seems to think Bitcoin will eventually bounce back.
Okay, so even if we hit a rough patch, it might not be the end of the world for Bitcoin.
That's what the AI is suggesting.
All right, so we've talked about the extremes, super bullish and super scary bearish. What about that sideways scenario where Bitcoin just kind of hangs out between $30,000 and $50,000? What's the AI thinking there?
I think in that scenario, the AI is picturing a period of consolidation for Bitcoin. Imagine it like a tug of war where neither side is winning. The positive things like growing adoption, they're balanced out by the uncertainty around regulation and the economy.
So it's like a stalemate. Bitcoin's not making huge gains, but it's not crashing either.
Exactly, it's not the most exciting investment, but it could be seen as a relatively safe store of value, especially compared to other assets that are more volatile.
So now I'm curious, from your perspective, which of these scenarios seems most likely? And hey, I know I can't ask for financial advice, but just your expert opinion.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's tempting to try to pick a winner, but I think the real lesson here is that the future is unpredictable.
So trying to figure out exactly what Bitcoin will do in 2025 is basically impossible.
Pretty much, yeah. It's more about understanding the different possibilities and the things that could influence what actually happens.
That makes sense. So if we can't rely on AI to give us all the answers, how do we actually use these predictions in a smart way?
That's a fantastic question, and it leads us perfectly into the next part of our deep dive. Because even though AI can't predict the future with 100% certainty, there are still some really practical ways we can use these insights to make smarter decisions about crypto.
All right, so we've talked about how AI crunches all this data to make these Bitcoin predictions. And we've gone through the three big scenarios it sees for 2025, bullish, bearish, and sideways. But the big question is, how do we use this info without just blindly following what the AI says?
Right. The key is to remember that AI is a tool. It's not like your personal financial advisor. It can give you some amazing insights, but ultimately you're the one making the decisions. It's like having a super smart research assistant, but you're still the boss.
So don't just turn off your brain because you've got AI on your side.
Exactly. You still need to think critically, especially when you're dealing with AI predictions. Remember, these models are based on what's happened in the past. And as we all know, the past doesn't always repeat itself.
Especially in the world of crypto.
Oh, yeah, things change so fast in crypto.
Plus, there are always those black swan events, those unexpected things that nobody sees coming.
Like that pandemic we talked about, no AI could have predicted how much that would mess with the markets.
So how do we find that balance between using AI's insights and still thinking for ourselves?
Well, one way is to think of AI as a way to understand the market better, not to replace your own understanding. Use it to help you spot trends, find opportunities, and get a feel for what everyone else is thinking.
But always do your own research.
Always.
The video mentioned a few platforms that use AI for market analysis, things like TradingView and CoinGecko. Have you ever used those?
Yeah, I've tried a few of them. What I like is that they can analyze huge amounts of data and see patterns that we humans might miss.
So they can help us see the big picture and the small detail.
Exactly. And then there's this whole other area called sentiment analysis, which is basically using AI to figure out how people are feeling about the market.
Right, by looking at social media, news articles, all that online chatter.
Yeah, it's like having a direct line to what the crypto community is thinking and feeling. Now, sentiment analysis is still pretty new, but it has a lot of potential, especially if you combine it with other types of analysis.
Okay, so we've got all these cool AI tools we can use, but we got to remember that AI isn't magic. It's just one part of the puzzle. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, one of the most important things, and this is true for any kind of investing, is to know your own risk tolerance. Crypto is risky, it's volatile, it's unpredictable, and you could lose money.
The video definitely made that clear.
Yeah, it's not about getting rich quick.
It's about understanding the risks and making smart decisions. Decisions that fit your financial goals and how much risk you're comfortable with.
Exactly. So before you invest in anything crypto or anything else, do your homework, understand the risks, and only invest what you can afford to lose.
Good advice. And remember, even with all this fancy AI stuff, there are no guarantees when it comes to investing.
That's right. The future is uncertain and things can change really quickly.
Well said. All right, so to wrap up this episode, one thing that really stuck with me from the video is that AI is always changing. The models are getting smarter, the data sets are getting bigger. Who knows what the future holds?
Yeah, it's a pretty exciting time to be following all of this. Just imagine if AI could actually predict the market perfectly.
That would be wild. But for now, the key is to be a little skeptical of AI, to use it as a tool to help us understand things better, and to never stop learning.
Couldn't agree more.
And to all of you listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into AI and Bitcoin. We want to hear from you. Have you ever tried any of these AI investing tools? What are your thoughts, your questions? Let's keep this conversation going.